Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends Podcast, the podcast I'm to help you feel, see, and think differently about the podiatry profession. With me today is a repeat offender. We have Dave James, and he is known as an irritatingly good speaker who helps business owners to speak with authenticity, if I can get the word out, fun and confidence. Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm good, mate. How are you doing? You okay?
Oh, was that the best intro or what?
I love an intro like that. Perfect, because you were practicing it before and didn't get it right. So.
At least I got the word authenticity out this time. I couldn't get it out last time.
Well, authenticity is one of those words which I think makes people throw up in their own mouths anyway, but I haven't found a really good alternative. So I love the word. Authenticity there's something else to authenticity, I think.
It's authentic.
It's authentic, yes. It's authentically authentic.
So you're known as an irritatingly good speaker, but you said you didn't call yourself that. Somebody else said you were irritatingly good speaker.
Yeah, I think like most people who've got a healthcare background, we're a little bit shy about shouting about how good we are. And I spoke at an event in Yorkshire for the Professional Speaking Association earlier this year and delivered a keynote of like how to be a happy human keynote. And I decided I was going to get some testimonials afterwards, some video testimonials for a show reel.
Yeah.
Proper speaker was meant to have a show reel and I still haven't got one yet. And a friend of mine, Simon, who was there, and I just said, will you give me a testimonial? He said, yes, I'd love to. And he said, I tried to pick fault in what he did and I couldn't. He was irritatingly good. And I went, I'm having that. I'm having that because it's nice to have a catch line where it's irritatingly good speaker. Now, I might have misheard and he might have just turned around and said I was irritating. Yeah. And that's okay as well. But I went, right, I'm having that. So that then became part of my marketing, irritatingly good speaker. And it's great because when I use it, I see other people pick up on it as well. So we met Dave today. He's an irritatingly good speaker. And I'm like, oh, cool.
I don't think you could come up with a better endorsement than that.
No. If someone looks at you and goes, oh my God, look at him. He's not going to be able to speak. And then I do. And they go, actually, he was surprisingly good or irritatingly good.
Yeah, but see, if somebody said you're surprisingly good, that has a total different meaning to it. They go, oh, surprisingly good. Because I expected you to suck or to not really be that entertaining. But surprisingly, you were okay. Yeah. It's like, I remember Zig Ziglar used to always... What did Zig Ziglar used to... You remember who Zig Ziglar is? The motivational speaker?
He was the guy who did the music for Yellow, didn't he? The Race. What's that thing? Oh, no, it's Ziggy Zigar. Sorry, that's a different one.
Zig Ziglar was a motivational speaker. But he used to say he would describe himself as a cross-eyed discus thrower. Never set any records, but he kept the crowd alert. And he used to mess around with that all the time. He always talk about he came from a really small town. His town was that small. They used to share a town drunk with the town next door. And just all this funny stuff, which is what I really liked about him, is he didn't take himself serious, even though he was extremely good at what he did.
It's connection with an audience. And there's a lot in that which sits in stand-up comedy. So there's classic things you would do within comedy, like you'll do rules of threes and you have misdirection and you have setup and punchline. And one of the things which people will do is they'll come on stage and go, I know what you're thinking, I look like, or I might be. And then they'll say something funny just to bring the tone down. So the cross-eyed discus thrower is a classic one.
I've got some other friends that are great speakers and they do the same thing. They will say something at the beginning to settle the crowd. Like I remember when I was at the Foot and Ankle show, walking up there on stage, 1,000 people there. And I was tossing up between, do I go with, geez, I wish I'd worn my brown pants today. Or I'm so excited, even I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say, which is where I think I went with. I think I went with that one.
Yeah. And that's part of the fun, though, connecting with an audience. And I see quite a lot of speakers who... status, you're definitely up on stage. You can have an ego if you're speaking on stage. You've got to have one, but you're always in service of the audience. So if you can connect with the audience very quickly and you can say, hey, look, I'm a real person, I'm a real boy, it helps with that connection because people don't see you as someone totally different to them. They see you as someone they can go, actually, I'm going to listen to this person because I feel some form of connection to them. Now, admittedly, I hosted a comedy gig recently, and one of the things I said at the beginning was, look, I said, 50% of you are going to think, yeah, he seems all right and reasonably funny. I said, the other 50% of you are going to think I'm a twat. And that all of those are absolutely okay. And I've done that on stage before at bigger gigs where I've walked on and said, look, some of you are going to think I'm all right. Some of you are going to think I'm a bit of a tool. And
Yeah.
that's perfectly okay, because you're acknowledging what people are thinking in that moment. And how many people are going to walk up on stage and go and look at that audience? And the foot and ankle show stage then was huge, huge, huge,
Oh,
huge.
yeah.
1,000 people in a room. I remember stepping on that stage because I was hosting it with Amy McLean. Stepping on that stage in 2019 and looking out there on the first day before anyone else was in and going, oh, this is huge. Big, big, big room. So how many people would get on stage and would go, oh, I think I've just had a little accident. So it's normalizing.
I remember sitting there in the crowd, watching the crowd gather and getting bigger and bigger. And then looking at my watch thinking, okay, I'm up there at this time. I'm seeing the speaker before me. And the nerves were just building up that I'm thinking, I must go up there. And I usually do this anyway. I usually say something that will try and get a reaction from the crowd. Because if I can get them to laugh with me at the beginning, it gives you that couple of seconds to breathe a little bit more, take it in. And then the next thing I did was, oh, while I'm up here, let's do a selfie. Because you're in it. You're in the selfie in the background with the arms up in the air. And I remember having the phone up there, doing the selfie and saying, can you just lean in a little bit on the right? And the whole right of the room, 500 people on the right of me, have all leant in and everybody laughed.
Yeah.
Which was great.
Yeah. You're connecting with the audience. And I know it's definitely a skill and it's something you learn and you play with. And you'll try and connect with an audience at the beginning and you'll get it totally wrong. But connecting with an audience, for me, that's one of the best parts of speaking, is being able to go in a room, because when you connect and have a conversation with them, and when I got the irritatingly good speaker thing from Simon in Leeds, when I was doing the keynote, one of the guys, he had to walk out. He had a phone call he had to take, and he came back in and he caught me afterwards and he said, Dave, he said, it was really interesting. When I walked back in the room, the first thing I did was look for the sofa. And I was like, sofa? He said, yeah. He said, because he said it felt like you were having a conversation with a room of people and it was your living room. Yeah. I was like, there's the connection right there. Now, if you can take, and that connection was probably 40 people in a room, but if you can take it to if you can connect with 1,000 people in an audience, how cool is that, to be able to get that connection so that people will listen and people will take exactly what they need from it, but they don't go away thinking, God, I've wasted that time.
Do you think it's the opening line sometimes that is the hardest part? When people, if they haven't done a lot of public speaking, it's the beginning part of how do I start? It's like priming the pump. It's getting the crowd warmed up. And there was something that somebody said recently, that when you're going up on stage is not to talk about yourself. Have the MC talk about how awesome you are. Don't you get up there and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to introduce. So if you're the MC of an event and you're speaking, you don't want to introduce yourself. No. It's a bit, ladies and gentlemen, bring it to the stage, Dave James. And then you come out and go, it's me. And you can use that as a bit of humor. But yeah, you want somebody else to big you up, and you don't want to repeat what they've just said. I saw a great post the other day on LinkedIn, which said one of the worst things you can have in a presentation is a title slide with your name on it. Just ditch a title slide. You've already been introduced. People don't need you to do that. And it's okay to go and speak and tell people about your experiences, why they should listen to you. But that should already be within the brochure. It should already be within the marketing and in the introduction anyway. And you want to get stuck straight in. But there are loads of ways of structuring speeches and talks and presentations, so many different ways. And you find something which suits your style. But there's a guy called Adam Bloom who wrote an amazing comedy book, and it's so amazing I've actually forgotten the title, but I've definitely got it down here.
It's probably called an amazing comedy book.
Oh God, what's it called? Here we go. Finding Your Comic Genius. It's always close to me. And Adam Bloom's an amazing UK comic, and he talks about these things called mic boom moments. So, for example, you stand up at a comedy gig and you tell a joke and the joke doesn't go down well. What you don't do is you don't turn around and go, oh, well, this was funnier in Leeds last week. Yeah. Because then you just burst the bubble that you are a funny person standing on stage for the first time and people are there to be entertained. Now, I think with speaking, you can do it slightly differently. I think you can burst that bubble. You can make people very present. And you doing yourself in the room and coming on and talking about those things brings you very presently into the moment, and you share an experience. I see a lot of speakers who aren't very present. who walk into a room and they
Oh,
don't try and connect with their audience. And so there's no hard and fast rules to it. But there are definitely things which make an audience feel more comfortable and make you more effective. And there are things which do totally the opposite. Now, you might want to do totally the opposite because you want to create tension and you want to be memorable. But you can play with it. And that's the beauty of it. The more you do, the more you find ways you can get yourself on stage. It's like having a persona on stage. But then the more you start to strip that off and you become more you and become more authentic.
I saw a comedian, Heath Franklin. He does these impersonations of Chopper Read, who used to be a B-grade criminal. Chopper Read. So, do you know who Chopper Read is?
I know Chopper Read. He had a big handlebar moustache, Chopper Read.
Big moustache, yeah. So he
did a film about him.
Yeah, Chopper with Eric Bana. So
that's right.
Heath Franklin is the comedian who impersonates Chopper Read. And does all these tours to harden the F up, because that's what Chopper used to say all the time. So he's coming to Cairns, and he's going to be practicing some material at a friend's pub. So we go along. There's only 20 of us there. And I'm watching him getting ready. So he's got on his mustache. So he got into character for it as well. But he's there, and I'm watching him sculling beers before he gets up on stage. Must have watched him scull about 4 cans of beer just in his prep. He gets up there, and of course we knew that this was practice material. So he's telling the joke, but he was half in character and half out of character as he's giving the material out. And some of it was funny, and some of it was crap. And even the crap stuff, he was going, oh, well, that was crap. And he crossed that. That got more of a laugh than the joke that he gave. But because he was in and out of character, it felt really weird that one minute he was actually himself talking to us, next minute he was Chopper, and then he was telling the joke, he was half and half between the two, like he couldn't make up his mind. What was important is when he came off stage, and his name's Heath Franklin, so I went up and said, hey, how you doing? I'm Tyson Franklin. We could be a mattress relation. But no reaction from him. He goes, oh no, we're probably not related. Okay, Heath. Not funny at all. So when he's on stage doing his talk, he sculled another couple of beers while he was on stage talking. Then when he came off, the first thing he grabbed when he came off was another beer. So I've counted probably about 8 or 9 beers he's sculled in this short segment.
Yeah.
But then when he was off stage, he was not funny. And I know that, okay, when you're on stage, you're playing a character. But I also think a comedian, when you come off stage, you should play another character, even if it's not you. Because you've still got to engage with the audience.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts to that, though, isn't there? I mean, one of the bits of advice when I started doing stand-up comedy a couple of years ago, I did a stand-up comedy course, which I never thought it's like stand-up comedy CPD, which is brilliant. And I remember chatting to James Cook, who taught the course, and I've done his course twice now, and he's up at the Edinburgh Fringe. In fact, so July now, so he's up at the Edinburgh Fringe now doing 2 shows. And we have the debrief before we do the show, a week out. And he'll say, there are certain things which people do which mean that the show go very badly. He said, but in 40 different, I think 40 different courses, he's only ever had 2 shows or 2 people within shows which have not gone well.
Yeah.
And he asked us, he said, what do you think the factor is which leads to that? And we go, I don't know, they hadn't practiced, or they turned up late, and then someone will just turn around and go, they were drinking. Because that whole kind of, it changes absolutely everything when you're drinking. Because comedy is a conversation between groups of people where you're trying to be funny, and everyone in the audience wants you to be funny. You add alcohol into the mix, it's going to change your judgment. But going back to what you said as well about personas and characters, yeah, absolutely. There's so many different levels to it. He's got a character. He's practicing material, so he's in and out of it, which is absolutely okay to do. We
expected that.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of people recently in Birmingham. I saw a guy on Friday night in Birmingham, Brendan Rees, who's a Manchester comic. He's preparing for the Fringe, so he's doing preview shows for the Fringe. So he comes on and he's got his notes, and he'll say to you, "This is a preview show. I'm working on stuff," and he's working out what's funny and what's not funny. And then off stage, people are very different as well. I know when I speak at an event, quite often I will come off and I've got energy for conversation, but then there's a point where it's like, actually, I need to go and regroup on my energy a little bit. And it's fascinating to watch.
Well, it's interesting, like you said with his notes. Yeah, he had his notepad there, but it was the most unorganized notepad I'd seen in my life. There were pieces of paper everywhere. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm sure this is how his mind works. He thinks of something, grabs a piece of paper, starts writing it down. He's just throwing all this all together. But it was the offstage persona that just threw me. I thought he'd go back to being Heath Franklin, which I expected. Didn't expect him to run around with his chopper mustache on the whole time. But just expected him to be friendlier to the crowd. But it was not.
It is interesting, isn't it? And the coachy Buddhist kind of person in me goes, well, you've got that intersection where actually you've got this funny joke planned. You've got this perfect joke planned on surnames. It's like, this will land at this point. You've got an expectation. And what he's got is all of this stuff which has gone on before, which has got him to this point. And he's running through in his head going, well, that joke about watermelons wasn't funny. And so he's thinking about all of those things, and you come up and give him a joke. And actually, I think your joke's absolutely fantastic. And his response was exactly the response he could muster in that moment. But you're like, oh, come on, do better. You're a comedian.
Yeah, but I was even just watching him interacting with other people. He was just like, he was polite. He got photos of everybody, but you could just tell that's who he was off the stage. Like my brother, have you heard of a comedian called Kevin Bloody Wilson?
Kevin Bloody Wilson. Santa Claus,
Santa Claus, where's my bike? Yeah. So anyway,
exactly. Obviously with other words fitted in there as well.
Anyway, my brother got invited to dinner, and he goes and has dinner at this person's place. And there's a whole 12 people sitting around a table, had dinner together. And they said, and then a couple of people got up and left. And they said, Tony, what are you doing now? He said, we've got tickets to go to the Kevin Bloody Wilson show. We've got front row. He goes, that'd be awesome. Do you want to come with us? He said, yeah, okay. So he goes along. He sits there in the front seat. And the guy he was sitting with at dinner all night walks out on stage. It was Kevin Bloody Wilson. And he's gone, what the? That's the guy that was at dinner with us that we're sitting with. He goes, yeah, Kevin, we introduced him as Kevin. I know, and he just said, you wouldn't have known when he was hit the stage, just completely different person. And as soon as he came off the stage, completely different person.
Mm-hmm.
So I assume some people do have that persona. It's who they are on stage. They're a character on stage. They're not a character off stage.
Yeah, and people practice comedy. I have jokes that I use in comedy in the same way as with speaking. And one of the, I do a short 7-minute thing, which is at networking events, where I will go through and I'll give three tips on speaking, how people can use it, and I will weave in different speaking techniques. And then at the end, in like the last minute, I'll go, what you might have noticed in the previous 6 minutes is actually me weaving in all these different things. So you'll actually break it down. And I talk about practice. And I say, it might look like I'm making this shit up. Yeah. But actually, there is a framework in here. And it's the same with comedy. It's like practice stuff. It's like going over and over again. It's recording yourself and speaking. It's recording yourself and going, what worked and what didn't? Can I shift this bit and flip them round? If I change the order of words here, will it sound differently? Like different words have different energies to them. So K-sounding words, cuss-sounding words in comedy are always much funnier. Like Cardigan and Kevin, they're naturally funnier.
I'm laughing with you just saying it, yeah.
Yeah. So
Kevin wearing a cardigan's even funnier.
Kevin caught cardigans carefully. So you can play around with language and move it in different places. And that's where the practice comes in, because Kevin Bloody Wilson gets up on stage. He knows he's got to hit it hard at the beginning to get people laughing. He's probably working on, there will be a laughter per words per minute. So it might be 8 laughs a minute or whatever it is. And it's all planned. And he will have practiced it enough to know what lands and what doesn't and where he needs to pause. And so, it's less spontaneous than people think it is. And that's the bubble being burst. That's the mic boom moment is, well, I thought they were someone who was naturally funny. And they might be funny, but you can take being funny. And that was one of the questions I asked when I did comedy. And comedy was always an add-on to the speaking. It was like, I want to do this to see how it affects this. I think I'm funny. I think I'm quick. I think I'm on the ball. But can that translate into being intentionally funny in front of an audience and saying something which I know is guaranteed to get them to laugh? Yeah. Very, very different thing.
It is different, because I know when I've done public speaking, I like to I mess around a little bit while I'm up there. I love to have a bit of fun, like to get the crowd to have a bit of a laugh. But I did a thing a few years back, a great debate. I'll have to show you the video. And the great debate was on the money is the root of all evil. And we all played characters. On my team, we had the devil, a nun, and I was the head of the crime family. So I've dressed up as Mafia with a scar. I'll have to show you my 6-minute skit that I did. And it was all planned out and rehearsed. And I've never heard so much laughing that, and I knew when I'd planned this whole thing out and the timing of how I was going to do everything, and when the big wooden dildo was being presented out of my violin case, I knew right at that moment that was going to get a laugh. So there were certain things, I just had it all planned out, scheduled over the 6 minutes, exactly how it was going, and it went absolutely perfect. But like you said, it was so rehearsed. Every joke was planned out in my head, went through it, ran it past other people, what worked, what didn't work, and you'll love the video.
It's misdirection as well. I mean, no one expects a sex toy in a violin case.
No.
Although now there might be some people listen to this who are wondering why their partner never seems to play the violin yet.
Yes, and what I refer to it as, I'm going to just go out, because I was the crime family boss, I went to the violin case, I flick it open, so it was a visual gag, and I said, I'm now going to reach in and pull out my weapon of mass destruction, and I pull out this big wooden dildo, which no one expected. And then I said it wasn't mine, I blamed one of the characters in the other team, which, if you knew who their character was, it was so inappropriate, but hilarious at the time.
So you've got here's my weapon of mass destruction. Oh no, that's my weapon of masturbation. You've got this play on. You've got to play on words with it, so you can have some fun with it. But that's the thing. In the moment, you might not think of something like that, but then later on, you might go, "Oh, actually, I can say this, and then I can say this, and then I can say this," and you can piggyback humor on. So you've got people laughing, then you do something else which makes them laugh more, then something else which laughs more. It's fun.
But if we go back to bringing this into, say, a podiatry context, for example,
please don't bring those things out in podiatry.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting the next time you're going to talk to Independent Retirees Club, you whip out any props, but
this will sort out your heel pain, Mrs. Smith.
Yeah, rub this on you, roll your foot on this in the morning. Jeez, I'm going to put an E for explicit on this episode, not for kiddies. Because kids are going to be asking, so Mum, what was that thing you were talking about? He pulled out of the... Anyway, so bring it back to a podiatry context. What you were talking about when you help business owners speak with authenticity, so I'm getting better with that, fun and confidence, but it doesn't matter how big the crowd is, this skill can be used.
Yeah, well, what are we doing now? This is speaking.
Pretty
You're going
much.
on a podcast and having a conversation is speaking. And this is one of the things I talk about with people is how do you define speaking? Is speaking just standing on a big stage in front of 1,000 people doing a selfie? Or is speaking having a one-to-one conversation or consultation with a patient and everything in between? Is speaking marketing your business on video? Is it going to a networking event and talking about stuff? Is it educating a group full of people in a room and teaching? It is all of those things. You find a style which works for you. The thing which I find really interesting is if you look around podiatry, and I still am a registered podiatrist with an HCPC registration and still occasionally go in and teach students. That's a whole other story on its own. Yeah. But
it's a different comedy show.
It's a very, that's entertaining in a different way. But if you look at the people who in podiatry and you maybe look up to or you will go and listen to because they educate, they are the ones who speak. They're the ones who stand out. They're the ones who teach. Now, if you take that into the context of what you do in your business, and one of the things which I find really frustrating in podiatry and foot health generally is people go and hide behind professionalism, and that's okay because you've got to be a professional person. But when it comes to marketing your business, they're not putting themselves forward and they're not being seen in their business. They're going, oh, look, I've got 5 ways of treating heel pain, instead of going, you know what, I might not be the best person who to treat everyone's heel pain, but I might be the best person for you, and I want you to see my personality. And I spoke at an event virtually in June, and the title of it was How to Market Your Practice Effectively Without Destroying Your Mental Health. Because marketing is, for a lot of people is really hard work. And I lent on the fact that actually it comes down to speaking, and it comes down to standing out and being seen. And I lent into one thing, which was video. Because if I trace back where I am now, it probably comes from doing videos years ago. It comes back from starting to do videos in 2015, and then people seeing those videos and going, "Oh, do you want to come and speak on our stage?" Like, yeah, right, I'll go and do that. And it got me into that whole process. But I asked the question, I said, how many of you are going to go and do video after this? And the chat was just like, no. And I'm like, okay.
So can I go back a step then?
Yeah, of course you can.
I know myself, I managed to go through primary school, high school, university without ever getting up and doing a public presentation.
Yeah.
I just didn't turn up that day. I was sick. Mm-hmm. I'd come up with some excuse. Oh, got no voice. I want anything. So I didn't have to do it. And I got right through my whole life without getting up because I was petrified of public speaking. Now, one thing led to another, and I eventually did it. And I didn't die doing it. I did read a thing that once said, nobody's ever died on stage doing public speaking. So that gave me confidence.
But Tommy Cooper did die on stage doing comedy. So, and there's actually, I think, from memory, the video is the curtain comes down and you've got his feet sticking out the bottom of the curtain. He literally died on stage. And there are lots of comedians who died on stage as well. So
yeah, I know. So I thought now would be a perfect time to just dive in and remind everybody that if you're looking or considering a podiatry business coach, before you reach out to some of the larger coaching companies, please go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, and read through the coaching section. You'll see I've got a model there called the Thriving Podiatry Business Model. And after you read through everything, there's also a link to my online calendar. From there, we can organize a 30-minute Zoom call. We'll have a bit of a talk. I'll explain the Thriving Podiatry Business Model in a bit more detail. And you may find just after that call, that is all you need just to give yourself a little bit of guidance. But if you want to take it further, I can give you more information. So please go to my website, tysonfranklin.com, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Okay, let's get back to the interview. What about you? When you started, were you nervous? Because there'll be people listening to this that might go, oh, yeah, but Dave James, he was just born able to just get up there and perform in front of people. So he just does it so easily. I'm not like that. I'm scared of public speaking. Were you that way at all?
Oh, I get nervous. I still get nervous now if I go.
So do I.
Yeah, and actually, I like that because it's if I'm not going to be nervous when I go and speak somewhere, then I'm not doing it right. And I think that there's so many things. So if I think, well, it's interesting. I've got this certificate. I found this out the other day. So the first time I did any kind of public speaking, I was 12. That's my English Speaking Board International thing. Ooh. And I got a good pass in the senior grade. Now, what's weird on that day is I'd actually broken my arm that morning. So I did it with a broken arm. So I've got one arm down by my side. But that was the first time I remember actually doing any kind of public speaking. And there's been various points throughout which I've done it. I think the first time, because I was asked I've been best man 5 times for people, which is always amusing and entertaining. I don't know why they asked me to be best man, but there must have been something in it. And I've had fun with that. But the first time I think probably I spoke professionally in a kind of podiatry context was 2017 at Osgo Live, so the predecessor of the Foot and Ankle Show. Okay. Tony Gavin messaged me and said, he said, I've got a favour to ask. And I was like, yeah, okay. And he said, 3 weeks' time, I want you to host my event. I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I said yes to it before I could think about it. And I remember getting a buzz from it. But speaking is something which I've worked at. It's something which I've gone, yes, I can do this, but how can I do it better? And there's a lot of work which goes on in the background. Am I someone who naturally can stand up? Maybe. And I think a lot of that comes back to teenager upbringing, hanging around adults, having to be able to have conversations with strangers back in the 1980s. It's one of those weird things that, yes, I think part of it is a nature thing, but there's definitely a nurture thing as well. There's definitely a working on that process. Yeah. And the more I've got to understand who I am, and the more comfortable I am with me, and knowing that I don't have to give the audience all of my knowledge in one go, has taken the pressure off slightly. So I can go and you put me in front of an audience and say, speak for 20 minutes on something. I'll go and have a conversation with the audience. So I'm not sure I've answered the question now. I think you did. I think you actually probably answered it better than I expected. So I could almost say I was irritatingly good.
Irritatingly good. Yeah, that was irritatingly good answer. No, but what I took away from that, what you said then, the key part was you don't have to share all your knowledge every time you speak. Yeah. And I think a lot of times when somebody asks you to speak, this is what helped me overcome my fear. When somebody has asked me to speak, they usually ask you to speak because you have more knowledge in that particular area than the average person sitting in the crowd. There might be someone there who knows more. But I've never been anywhere where someone's seen a speaker come on stage and they go, God, I hope they bomb.
Because, no, exactly.
Because if you're terrible for half an hour, that means they've got to sit there and put up with it. So everybody is hoping you do a great job.
Yeah. And the same with comedy. No one goes to a comedy gig going, tonight I don't want to laugh.
Yeah.
No one does that. They want you to do well. And it is the same with speaking. I'm sure there are some people at speaking events who go, I don't like that person. I want to see them fail. And that's a personal individual. But most of the time, people they're spending their money, they're investing their time to sit in a room. And I find it really interesting. And healthcare events are very much like this. I find it really interesting that healthcare events probably have more death by PowerPoint than many places.
Yeah.
Where people come along and they stand behind a podium and they go through 600 slides with 600 words on. And I remember doing
I really just want to throw things at the crowd up on the stage.
Yeah.
To say, please stop doing this to me.
Yeah. Maybe even like take a violin case next time and throw something which is significantly weighty in rubber. But it's interesting because I almost did a PhD in podiatry. I almost did it. And it wasn't necessarily because I wanted to expand the knowledge of being a podiatrist and expand the foot health world. It's because I wanted to go and take my research and speak on stage and not be boring. Yeah. Because I saw so many people, and I apologize to anyone who I know who has a PhD with this, because obviously it's not you. But you see so many people who deliver their knowledge in a way, and I wanted people to listen to the stuff I'm sharing and go, bloody hell, that is really interesting. I want to go and do a PhD because that sounds sexy as hell.
Part of the problem is you see someone get up on stage, present their findings from their PhD, and you go, God, you must have to be a really boring person to do it, and then to put together such boring slides and try. Yeah. And I don't know if the goal is, we've got 200 people in front of me. I'm going to see how many can I make fall asleep or leave the room.
Yeah, and I think we get the balance. We get this weird balance with value, where it's like we've got to give value to an audience, which means we've got to give them everything. Yeah, and we know, if you look, talking about burgers, you know that the best burgers in the world are not the ones which have got every ingredient within them.
No.
They're the ones which are beautifully sourced meat, which is well looked after by a chef who understands how to cook it perfectly, seasoned perfectly. It's dead simple. And you remember that because it gives you an amazing experience. And it's the same with speaking. If you give people too much, they don't know what to do with it. If you don't give them enough, they leave feeling dissatisfied. The art is to give them the perfect amount and leave them wanting a bit more. It's interesting with the same people who present in a way and you go, my God, you're boring. When I spoke at primary care last year, I did my STRAP process, which is it's like a mental health process for, the idea is that you put this process in front of someone when they first work for you. They work through, and if there's a mental health issue, they pull the cord, and you've got this document which says exactly what people need to do. And it is, are you safe? What time do you need? What resources have you got access to? What activities or actions can you take? And what people do you need or not need around you? And I presented this as a thing. And as an aside, the person who was chairing the event afterwards said to me when I was sat down and we were listening to the next speaker, and she went, I really liked your strap-on process. And it was very hard for me to not crack up at that point. And I just said, thank you, and carried on. But one of the other speakers on the day was a lovely man, Dr. Ben Bullen. And Ben said to me before he was speaking, he said, is there any advice you can give me around speaking? And I went, yeah, okay. Well, I know what you're talking about. He's talking about Charcot foot. And he's there in a suit and he's got a huge beard. He looked on that day like he looked like someone had just come out of the homeless shelter and stolen a suit. Yeah. And I said this to him. We were laughing about it. And I said, you don't normally wear a suit for work, do you? And he went, no. I said, so you're presenting stuff up there? I said, in a uniform, which is very different to what you wear. I said, so the first thing I would do is come on stage, take your jacket up, roll your sleeves up. Just go and change your state and change the energy in the room. And it gives you this pause where people are going, what's going on here? Because when you roll your sleeves up, you mean business.
Yeah.
And I do it where the tattoos are covered, and then I'll roll the sleeves up and tattoos appear, and people are like, oh, there's something different now. And he'd already got his jacket off because the person who spoke before had used him as a model for vascular stuff. And I sat in the front row and I watched him, and he got up on stage. And I said, the other thing I said is, don't stand behind the lectern. Get them to give you a Britney microphone and walk around, move around if you can, if you're happy to do that. It's like no slut dropping and no baby, none of that. Just move around a little bit. And he had this microphone on, and he walked out from behind the lectern. He said, the work I'm going to talk to you today about is academic work. He said, but it's not rooted, he said, in academia. It's rooted in clinical practice. He said, so I don't need this. And he took his tie off and he undid his top button and put the tie on the back of the chair. And it was one of the things which changed the energy in the room, because he'd acknowledged that he was here in one capacity, but actually he was sharing something from a different place. And it was just that one acknowledgement changed it. And that's one of many kind of examples I can think about where just changing one thing changes everything. And I'm going to have to reference Jonathan Small, obviously, because...
Jonathan, yes. If Jonathan is not mentioned on this podcast, he will listen to this episode, and if he doesn't get a mention, he'll be going, you bastards don't love me anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Jonathan spoke I spoke this year at Foot and Ankle. He spoke last year at Foot and Ankle. And I've loved watching his development as a speaker over the years. So from Osgo Live through to the Foot and Ankle show, he's had this whole kind of elevation in his speaking style. And it's been an absolute pleasure to watch. It's been so nice to see how his confidence has changed with speaking. But he did something which for me was beautiful at the Foot and Ankle show last year, where he starts talking and then he said, I'm going to tell you a story. And there's a chair on stage and he sits on the chair. And as he sank into the chair, the audience sank with him. And they got it made the room smaller. And I was chatting to him afterwards and I said, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. I said, where did you pick that up from? And he just looked at me and went, well, you. He said, I saw you do it. I was like, okay, fair enough. But he changed his state beautifully, and he changed the state of the room, and he connected with the room, because he didn't stand up on this podium and go, let me tell you a story about this. He sat down and said, let me tell you a story about how I really messed things up and how I nearly ended up screwing up things for myself financially. And he sat down and told the story like he was having a conversation like this. And it's things like that which we don't see in academic presenting and academic speaking.
That's true.
I love the craft of speaking, because you can use some very subtle techniques which change the experience for everyone in the room.
Yeah, I think academic speakers need to, one, listen to this episode. You know they won't, but it'd be great if they did. But it's one of those things that academic speakers get up there and I don't know, maybe they get off on all the words and all the information and the overload. And it's the way it's always been done. But I think as soon as somebody changes it, they're like Dave Cashley did a talk in 2019 about, I think it was his neuroma research he was doing at the time. And I just remember him doing his talk. And yes, he had a bit of stuff on the slides, which could have been a little bit too much, but I think he apologized every time he put one up there. But then at the end, I love how he said right at the end, now I want you to look at the person to your left, and I want you to say, well, there's my life, 30 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back. And everybody cracked up laughing, and he got a standing ovation as he walked off. It was fantastic. Yeah. And I went up to him after that and said, I need you on the podcast. I want to talk about neuromas. And he did come on. But he was probably one of the first academic ones where I went, well, that was a presentation that didn't bore me. And I wanted to know, when he finished, I'm going, I'd like to know more about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the key thing. So there's an element of that of primacy and recency. So we remember the first thing we're told, remember the last thing we're told. So in any kind of clinical consultation where you're giving people advice, they'll remember the first thing and they'll remember the last thing you tell them when going out the door. So you have to reinforce it. Same with speaking. It's how you close and how you get people to take things away. But there's a really interesting thing about how you deliver information to people. And what is it you want people to take away? So if you've got a 60-second pitch, and I have conversations with a lot of people about 60-second pitches, because you go to a networking event, you've probably got 30 to 60 seconds. And everyone goes, I've got to tell you all this long list of things that I do. And it's nothing to do with that. It is, you've got 60 seconds to be memorable enough and likable enough so that people go, I want to have a conversation with you afterwards.
Yeah.
And that's the name of the game. And it's the same. If you've got a 60-minute 60-minute workshop, you need to give people stuff they can take away in that workshop, but not too much. And I think sometimes with speaking, as we see, everyone get the most amazing research, the most beautiful things, which will change the lives of people clinically, will change the clinicians, and will change the people they help and serve. But you give them everything in one go where you can't understand half of it, and then you deliver it over, far too much time. And people go away from it going, well, I don't know what to do with it. I'm not sure what I do with this information. And Dave Cashley's stuff, I know Dave, and I know he does joint mobilization and manipulation and things like that as well. But I know his approach to it is so different to other people that I'm interested clinically to find out more. And that's what you need. You need someone who can plant a seed and go, here is the beginning of something. Let me help you understand it and get excited by it. But if you want to have a conversation about it later, come and chat to me afterwards. And then we can sit down and geek out on things together. Yeah. And you've got, think about that in terms of speaking, is if you serve people up with absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And because you feel you've got to put it all in, because you've got that 20 minutes or 30 minutes with an audience, and you're like, right, I've got to put everything in so that they go away and go, I got real value from that. The value is what people take from it and use. And we know there's all kinds of graphs around retention of information. So it starts off quite high and I've got all this information and I've got all this intention of using it. And then a day later, it drops off a little bit. And then by a week, you remember one thing. You remember that the sandwiches and the menu was shit. you don't remember any of the other stuff. And I can still remember, and this is the way things stick with you. I remember Ian Griffiths speaking at, I think it was the 2012 Biomechanics Summer School. And I remember that event because it was his first ever speaking event where he's talking about how we should get rid of overpronation as a term. We ordered T-shirts. Well, I say I ordered T-shirts for the front row, and which say, I heart overpronation. We all got a bit shuffly within the first 5 minutes. Then we took our shirts off and we had these I heart overpronation. He was like, you bastards, you just distracted me. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember Craig Payne doing his boot camp in 2010 in Manchester, where he talked about was a study, this is how geeky I am, where he talked about a study where took a number of people with pronated feet, overly pronated feet, and they casted them from different labs. They gave them these devices. Everyone got better, but when they measured them, everyone pronated more. And I remember that was that flip going, it's not about position, it's about force. And so there's those things which stick with you. And that's all you need. I still remember as well, a guy called Mike Ratcliffe, who is one of my favorite human beings in the world, was our anatomy lecturer at university. In 2005, stood a young lady on a desk at university called Amanda, lifted the big toe up, showed me the windlass mechanism. I ended up with a master's degree in 2015 off the back of that one move. It's never underestimate the ability to have one piece of information to transform people. Stuff in.
Yeah, so simplify what you're talking about. Don't try and overload.
If you're speaking academically, what is the one thing that you want people to take away from that?
I remember Simon Bartold talking, might have been 1991 or 1990 on the Sunshine Coast. And the only thing I took away from his talk that I can remember, and he laughs every time I mention it to him, he was talking about how podiatrists think orthotics fix everything. He said, if some of them even probably think they fix hemorrhoids, but they don't. And that was the one thing I took away from it, was this hemorrhoids joke. And then remember bumping into him a few years back, and I said, I remember that talk you did on the Sunshine Coast. That comment you made about hemorrhoids. He goes, can you remember anything else I spoke about? And I went, no. I said, but I remember that joke. I said, it was really funny. But it was at that point when it was the first time I'd seen him speak. And he was just very casual. And what I liked about it, he made occasional little jokes throughout his talk. That's what I took away from it, that he was a pleasurable speaker to watch.
Yes. And it's that balance between somebody who knows their shit.
Yeah.
And somebody who is comfortable talking about that, as they know their knowledge intimately. And with the stuff when I work with clients, one of the things I say is you have to know your stuff. It's much easier to talk off the cuff and openly and weave your way around knowledge which you know intimately. If you don't know it, you're always going to stumble. You're always going to be on the back foot. But if you know your stuff, and we know Simon knows his stuff. He's been around the industry for so long. And going back to what you said about the comedian earlier, that on stage and in character, on stages themselves, off stage totally different. Now you take someone like, so we've had a conversation on Zoom. We've met in real life.
Yeah.
Same person you on stage, same person throughout. Okay, there's a little bit of variation because when you get up on stage, you've got nerves. It's going to be different. Yeah. There's a little bit of setting up on podcasts, but in real life, it's you. Same language, same conversation, same energy. Same with Simon. Simon gets up on stage and speaks, and it's not
exactly the same.
Simon
Doesn't change,
show, obviously. Same person in the bar afterwards. Same person when lecturing. He's got that kind of cheek, that fun. And actually, probably the line back to him is you can fix hemorrhoids with orthotics because you put them in your shoe and then you kick someone up the arse. Yeah. So you can they can fix hemorrhoids. But it's about and a friend of mine, Mark Whitehand, who does a lot of storytelling coaching and is up north in the UK. He talks about being the coffee version of you. He said, if you sit down and have a cup of coffee with someone, is that the same person that you see online on videos, or is it the same person on stage, or is it the same person right across the board? And he said one of the things which really frustrates him is when he has a conversation with somebody over a coffee and then he sees them online and they're just talking bullshit. And he's like, because I know that's not you. And there's a total incongruence and inauthenticity. And while people maybe don't recognize that, they feel it. And that's one of the beautiful things about speaking is if you can get people to feel connected and you can get them to feel the congruence between who you are and what you're saying and how you're delivering, it's a magical thing. That's when you get people say to you, it's like sitting in your living room having a conversation with you.
Well, that's what people say about the podcast. When I've had people say, I listened to the podcast, and when I've met you now live, they say you're exactly the same live. You sound the same. You act the same way, the same terrible jokes, same humor. And that's how I want it. And even when I'm on stage, like you said, sometimes you get a bit of nerves or you might have a time limit. It's a topic you're covering. So you can't joke around all the time, but you can't hide who you are.
No. But how many healthcare professionals do that? How many healthcare professionals, they hide their personality because they're scared that they'll get in trouble with it. And I still remember one of the things I talk about when I do my How to Be a Happy Human is I talk about authenticity. And I remember marketing my podiatry practice right at the very beginning. And it was, you didn't see any tattoos. I'm this HCPC registered podiatrist with a podiatric medicine degree, first class honours, don't you know? And I'm professional and I can help sort out your foot pain. And people will come in the clinic and get a different version of me. And you could see that they were like, ooh, he's different. I'm not sure what it is. He's all right. Or we'll get over this. So I had a choice. I either flipped how I behaved in clinic to be more professional, or to be that marketing version of me, or I flipped my marketing to be more me. And I was like, right, I'm flipping the marketing. Now, that doesn't mean I go in there and I'm swearing and every other word begins with a C and ends with a T. I'm offensive. It's actually, you're going to get the humor and the energy and the levity and the lightness, but also know the base of everything I do. I know my stuff. I'm a funny guy with a master's degree. It's knowing that the knowledge is there, that I'm going to help you. I'm going to do everything I can for you, but we're going to have some fun on the way.
Yeah.
And people hide that.
Yeah. I think you have to be yourself. And I think if you're actually a boring person, then I don't think you should try and not be a boring person. If you're just, because if everyone knows you're boring and you're invited to speak as a boring person, then you just got to be yourself. And people might come up and say, you're a bit boring. And you'll go, I know, which is funny. And you can even get up and say, you might find me a little boring, because I am. And I think as soon as you tell people what they're about to expect, then all of a sudden they go, you might be boring, but you can still have a personality. You can still get the couple of messages. You can still get those things across, even if you're a boring person. You just do it in a different way.
And there's, for me, there's always a balance in this. It's very easy to look at a conference and put everyone who can speak really well, everyone who's entertaining and charismatic and can hold a room, and put them on stage because it's more entertaining. But then maybe sometimes you lose a lot of the really useful information in the middle of it. But it's really easy. I say it's really easy, or maybe it's really simple and not easy, to be able to take somebody who hasn't got any experience of speaking, but has some real value to offer and some real knowledge, and actually to work with them to get to a point where they can deliver something which is really cool. Because if you've got all this knowledge and all this experience and this stuff which can massively change the world, then why wouldn't you want to put it out there? You want to share this with the world because you know that when people see this and people lean into it and they use it, that they can make a difference to the people that they help and the people they work with. Why wouldn't we want to do that? So if you can help people do that, it makes a huge difference.
I've got this one talk that I'm actually doing it for the Osgo online.
In September.
In September, yeah. And it's on persistence and resilience. But I've done the talk twice before, a couple of years ago. And the first time I did it, somebody approached me and they said, I know you really well, and I know that you had a couple of really big, bad moments in your life that nobody knows about. I'd love you to do a presentation on it. I went, oh, okay. So I put this talk together, and I did. It was for a franchising group up in Port Douglas. Did it. There was a big group there. Following me was Steve Bradbury, who was our first ever gold medal winter Olympian. And he was sitting there listening to it. And when I came off, he as he walked past, he went, oh, shit, I can't believe I have to follow that. Because it was probably the most authentic talk I'd ever done in my life, where this talk was about me. It was not about business, it was about me and certain things I actually went through. Somebody else heard about it. They said, oh, can you do that talk for our group? So I did it for them as well. And they went, oh, shit, that was good. So when Osgo approached me and said, oh, we want you to do a talk, here's some topics that you do, and they had my title, Persistence and Resilience. And I went, holy shit, I haven't done it for a couple of years. That's the talk that I'm going to do. And even just thinking about it, it's just like this emotion on the inside of me. It's a different talk, but there are some funny moments in there. I do mention boobs.
Well,
twice.
Twice.
And didn't want to leave one out.
But that I always get excited when people do that. And when I was asked to host the Foot and Ankle show, Osgo Live in 2017, I did it. And then I had some offers come in to be paid to speak the following year within podiatry and foot health. So Kettering, Royal College of Podiatry, primary care. And it was like, brilliant, I'm up for this. I better go and do some training on speaking.
Yeah.
Aside from my English speaking board exam certificate. And so I actually went and did a couple of courses, and they were great. And one of them, you worked over 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, you have to deliver this 5-minute speech to an auditorium. No slides, props if you want them. And I'd worked on this whole thing up until probably about 2 weeks before, where I was going to talk about the chimp paradox, Dr. Stephen Peters' work. And it was because I was going through a lot of personal development. I was like, I want to talk about this. This is transformational for me. And then about 2 weeks out, I went, this isn't the right thing to talk about. It doesn't feel close enough to me and personal enough to me.
Yeah.
So instead, I said to my ex, I said, do you mind if I talk about anger? Because I'd lived with anger. Anger had been a thing right the way through from my teenage years after the death of a friend. And it was how I communicate with the world. And then 2015, my wife threw me out of the house. And so there's this whole kind of story arc in the background about how I got there. And what I want to talk about is what I'd learned on that journey of learning about my anger and how I'd transformed through that. And she went, yeah, that's fine. So I did a 5-minute talk. And it was called Colin because Colin is the name of my chimp.
Yeah.
So my bit of my brain. And so the idea was I was going to walk out on stage with this big stuffed chimp, put him on a chair, and then talk about Dr. Stephen Peters' work. I never changed the title of it. So I get announced, it's Dave James coming to the stage to talk about Colin. And there was no Colin and no chimp. There's nothing which references it at all. And the chimp sits in my bedroom upstairs. But I told this whole story about anger. And I said to people I'd put it online if I got it. And I said, if you want to see it, and they went, yes, we'd love to. Put it online and literally just posted it on Facebook, closed the laptop, walked away from it and went, right, that's it. No one's going to want to talk to me anymore because I've shared about how on the surface I'm this very happy person, but actually inwardly I was self-destructive and angry and shouting and breaking things. And it was totally the opposite. People connected with it because it was like, thank you for talking about that. And yeah, I struggle with some similar things. And so when you talk about those more personal things, you connect with people on a much deeper level. Jonathan and his talk about his financial struggles and the way he delivered it, he showed people a side of him that maybe he hadn't openly shown. And people went, it's not just me. It connected people. And that's one of the beautiful things about speaking is if you can connect with an audience in that way by going, I'm actually not dissimilar to you. And if I've done something to improve my situation, it's probably something you could do as well. Maybe something different, but there's going to be hope for you in there.
Yeah, or maybe you could skip the mistakes
in a different way.
Yeah, skip the mistakes that we made. But I don't know. I did a talk when we won a business award, and then the government contacted me and said, "Hey, can you do some talk to some health practitioners in Warwick?" I went, "Yep, not a problem." Went down there, started doing the talk, and when you just feel you're connecting with the crowd, but there was one person in the crowd. I was just looking at him and making eye contact, and I can just tell she doesn't like me. She does not like me. So I kept going with this workshop, and eventually I just stopped, and I said, sorry guys, I've got to stop. I can't go any further. Everyone's go, "What's up?" I said, and I pointed at her, said, "Why do you hate me so much?" I said, "It's just written all over your face. You do not like me." And she went, "Well, the information you give us is fine, but it's okay for some people who were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. But for the rest of us, it's a little bit harder." And I went, I said, "Silver spoon." I said, "The spoon, if I had had one in my mouth, would have been plastic." And then luckily there was somebody in the crowd that day, and I said, "Hey, Jason, remember when my car was getting repossessed because I couldn't make repayments?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Because I remember I had to distract him while you went and hid the car." And I said, "Exactly." And I said a couple of other things. I said to her, I said, "I'm the furthest from having a silver spoon in my mouth." But what it made me realize is sometimes people only ever see the end product. They don't see the turmoil, pain, suffering, demons that a lot of us go through, and everybody goes through it.
Yeah.
And I think when you get on stage, I think it's important to share that little bit about yourself every now and then, to remember that the people seeing you, they don't want to see just the finished product. Sometimes it's good to see some of the flaws, some of the mistakes that you've made, and they can sit there and go, okay, he's not as clever as what we thought. He has made plenty of mistakes.
Yeah. And it's that connection and that humanizing that you have. And it's I think there's an art to this. And one of the things which I don't see a lot of speakers do, and sometimes I see more of it now, is people actually sharing where they are in this moment. And again, that's a very fine balance, because you could be having a really bad day, and I've seen it where people go on social media and say, "I'm having a really bad day," and it's like, okay, that's fine, but then it's also, what's the intention of that? Because some people will. There was a guy who ended up sacking like thousands of people from an organization, and did it remotely without any kind of remorse. It was just literally, we need to get rid of 1,000 people, boom, done. And then went and did a social media post where they were crying online, going how hard it was they'd had to sack all these people. And you could see through it totally. The energy was totally wrong. And it's that kind of thing which doesn't work. The stories you tell, the connections you make, the lessons which you offer to your audience have to be rooted in service to the audience. And I'm guilty of some of the stuff which I speak about and have done over the years. I'm guilty of almost like having therapy on stage. I'm talking about this stuff because actually it makes me feel better to be able to share it and talk about it. But it's thinking about, well, actually, if I tell this story, who does it benefit? Is it so I can connect with my audience better? Is it so I can teach a lesson? Is it so I can, like you did, say, actually, you think I come from this, but actually I come from this? Or is it there because actually you're telling a story and you want to show how amazing you are? And I suppose it's the speaking equivalent of, or the social media equivalent of sitting on your Ferrari with dollar bills, y'all, and showing how successful you are. Or the whole, here I am sat with my Ferrari, but it wasn't always like this. Sometimes I used to drive a Fiat. And it has to be helpful and in service of your audience, and that's a beautiful balance. And sometimes I get it very right, and sometimes I get it totally wrong.
We've all done talks where you walk off and you think you did a good job, but when you reflect on it later, you go, "I could have done better." I did one in Cairns once, and whenever I spoke about my dad, it was a real, because my dad died when he was 49, I was only 17. It was a really raw moment in my life, and I remember talking about it on stage once for this particular talk I was doing, and I got upset. I cried. And I felt at the time really stupid that I was tearing up. And and I didn't know what to do. I was just stuck. And then somebody got up and clapped. I just went, okay, I haven't stuffed up. And then when I came off, the people that came up to me afterwards and just went, "That was amazing. Oh, shit, I'm getting emotional now."
Yeah. Yeah.
Might have to pause.
Strong
No,
stuff.
it was.
Strong stuff.
And it's that type of thing that I think when it's shared at different times, it actually has meaning.
Yeah. Yeah. You can, and this is where crafting those stories and using it appropriately makes a difference. And the thing is that anyone listening to any speech talk or being present for any presentation you do will take away what they take away from it. You can guide them. You can say, here's what I think I'm telling you, but people will see something different. And again, it's that intersection of, I'm talking to you, I'm telling you what this stuff at the moment, and here's my experience and my background and maybe my hopes for the future. What you don't know is you don't know what's going on for them. And it may well be that they woke up that morning and they've had a really terrible journey in, and they're not ready. They're not ready to hear the lesson that you've got. And that's fine. That's absolutely okay. You've got the ownership of what you're saying and how you're using your stories and how you're using your stories responsibly and your information responsibly. But also it's the ownership for the audience as well, that they go, I didn't get what I wanted from that. Why is that? Is it because the person didn't give me what I needed, or because I'm not ready to receive what was there? And it's a very interesting discussion, that one, because whose responsibility is it to get something from a presentation or speech? And in the same way, whose responsibility is it to get something from a coaching or mentoring relationship? Is it the person delivering, or is it the person receiving? It's a very interesting conversation.
It is where you are at the moment, like in that point in time. But also, going back to one of your things, it's about the authenticity of it all. Because I've seen some speakers where they've obviously been given a topic to talk about, and they're told this is when you're delivering it. So they put together that talk, they get it, they deliver it, and they go, here's your 3 takeaway points, and they go through it. And you go, oh, that was interesting. But you can tell it was just a well thought out talk. There wasn't a lot of emotion, meaning, feeling involved in it. But when I did that talk with my dad, as I was talking about before, that I got emotionally upset talking about it. When I did it the 2 times, talking about resilience, I got upset both times when I spoke about it. And it's just because it's such a raw thing. And even though, like, he died in 1983, you think I'd be over it by now, but it's still.
No, I still talk now because of the anger thing. When I talk about how to be a happy human, that the thing where that all started was January 1988.
Yeah.
On a Sunday morning, when my friend Stuart at school he was abducted and murdered. And that's the point where suddenly, being 14 years old, and I thought I was 14 years old, I was this very tall adult. So I was the same size that I am now, essentially. It's like, well, I was an adult, so it's okay. And then I looked at my youngest, who turned 14 in June, and I looked at him and went, it's that sudden realization that actually you're not an adult. You've got a mustache, and you're having conversations with him which are very adultish in nature, but essentially you're still a child. And it's like, so that's what I was like at 14. And that sudden realization, and you feel the emotion of that. But I still talk about Stuart now. And I talk about Stuart as part of my journey. And I'll say, when I'm speaking about it on stage, I'll say, and I'm talking to you about this from a very headspace, because even now I'm still working through it. That's 1988.
Yeah, well, obviously I still am too.
Yeah, and that's okay, because that's what it is to be human, right? We've got all these things which affect us, and there are all these things which travel with us, and all these things which are contextual. And you talk about a relationship with an individual, like a father and son relationship. Well, then you talk to somebody else who has a relationship with father-son relationship and how it is for them. You will automatically try and line up those stories. You see yourself in the stories of others. So when you talk about your dad and you get emotional on stage, there'll be other people in the audience who will be thinking about their relationship that they have with their father or their mother or their grandfather. They'll make it about them, and that stuff's powerful.
Dave, this has been absolutely fantastic. I always know whenever I get you on here, one, we talk for a long time.
Yes. 7-part episode.
7-part episode. But that's fine, because I would rather people get the information than cut it short. And if people haven't listened all the way to this part, then shame on them.
Exactly, they lose out, and they then don't have to. Well, they don't get the opportunity then to think thoughts about people they love.
So yeah, it's true. One tip I'm going to get you to have a final tip, but one tip I wanted to share, I was talking about this over the weekend, and someone was talking about just public speaking and how you get started. And I said, normally I'll say something funny when I get up on stage, like the brown pants, or I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. That because it just gets in the right train of thought. But I said, if you're doing a smaller group, and it might be a group of potential patients, I used to find just asking them have a set question that you want to ask them first, because therefore you'll get some feedback. And that feedback can start a conversation which you can then blend into your presentation. Or you may not have an opportunity to have a PowerPoint. So you might just have to talk for 20 minutes. But having a set question where you know you're going to get an answer, and then you can keep the conversation going from there, works well. But I told them the story where I had about 50 people in a room. I walk in there. I thought, what's the question? Okay. Has anyone here had orthotics before? This one lady at the back puts her hands up and says, I have. I said, that's great. Now, how do you find them? They're shit. Oh my God. It always had to be the one. I said, hey, come up and I said, have you still got them? She said, yeah, I'm wearing them now. Not a problem. So she came up on stage, sat down. I said, take them off for me. So she takes them out. Now, not only did she have them in the wrong shoe, she had them turned up around the wrong way. So she had the heel cup shoved in the toe box. And so I took them out and I put them in the right way. I said, you stand up on them now. She went, oh my God, they feel so much better. So I said, so when these were fitted by the podiatrist, she goes, there was never a fitting. I said, what do you mean there wasn't a fitting? Well, they weren't fitted. I saw them, they did a cast, and then I was told to come and pick them up at the reception. So I picked them up and I took them home, and that looked like the shape of my shoes. So I just put them in there, and that's how I've been wearing them for the last year or so. I said, okay. And I said, did you tell them that they were uncomfortable? I tried calling numerous times, but no one would ever get back to me. They just ghosted me. So then my talk, based on that, changed to what I thought was how a proper consultation should run, how a proper review should run. Went through the different treatment types. So my talk for what I was going to talk on orthotics, I totally changed it, because everyone listen to this. You've got the friggin' knowledge. You can talk about anything podiatry related to any group at any time, and you can pivot. So I pivoted from an orthotic talk to a patient care talk and treatment journeys on how I felt things should run, why you should have review visits, why the place that you're ringing should be getting back to you if they care about you. Totally changed it. So what's your final tip? That's my tip to everybody. You've got the knowledge, use it.
Well, that's a really good tip. And I think one of the things I say to clients about speaking is, how do I get better at speaking? It's like, you go and speak. You just put yourself out there and speak. If you are a potter and you are making beautiful bowls on a pottery wheel, you've got to be willing to put clay on the wheel. You've got to be willing to turn the wheel, and you've got to be willing to bugger up a few pots. So you go and speak it to an audience. Are you going to be perfect for straight away? You might be. Chances are you're not. So I think the best thing to do is actually get out there and speak. But it's interesting. I think one of the things that you've got there in that story you told is there's listening and there's shifting to accommodate the room, and it's in service of the audience. And it reminded me of a session I did for the Royal College of Podiatry last year. I'm always amused by this. So I still do stuff for the Royal College of Podiatry, and they always wheel me out and say, will you go and talk to the students? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go and talk to the students. But do you realize I'm the person who is now the other side of the profession and left the profession partly because I was burnt out by it and fed up with it. Yeah. And now you're putting me in front of a group of students, and I'm meant to entertain them and keep them in there. By the way, you're coming into a profession, which is really cool. And they went, well, no, we put you in front of it because you can hold the audience and you don't lie to them. You basically just go in there and tell them what they need. And I did a session last year at the Royal College of Podiatry, and I turned up and I was chatting to one of the people from the Royal College, and I said, what is it I'm speaking about? And she went, have you not planned anything? And I went, well, no. I said, we were talking about it before, you didn't give me a title. So I stood in front of the audience and I said, look, I'm going to tell you for 2 minutes about me as to why I'm here and what I think I can do for you. But then you're going to ask me questions. And I said, the reason for that is I think in my head what would be useful for you to know, but I want you to tell me what would be useful for you, and I will answer your questions to the best of my ability. If I don't have the answers, well, we can find them out. But I will share whatever you need to hear. And it was one of the most wholesome sessions I've ever done, an hour of me wandering around just with the students and them asking questions. About 110 people in the room. By this point, and they didn't know who I was, and I'd already taken my shoes off. and I was wandering around in my socks, and they were just wondering who this strange bearded bloke was. But it was a lovely conversation because it was just open and in service of the audience. It was like, what is it you want to know? And if I don't know the answer, then I can't answer it for you, and I'll tell you. Part of that comes back as well to being comfortable with knowing that there's some things I don't know and being able to go, hey, look, I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think there's so many things in there, but just get out there and speak. And I would love to see more people in podiatry going to events and speaking, even if it's a local networking event. A lot of people don't go to networking events, but go to a networking event and practice a 60-second pitch. Practice telling a story about one of your clients you've helped. Not the, I'm a podiatrist, I can cut toenails, I can do nail surgery. Go and tell the story about the guy who you did a Doppler test on, found an irregular heartbeat, sent them back to the GP, and then 4 weeks later they came back to you and said, you saved my life.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stories you can tell. So yeah, I think there's so much. There's so much.
That's an awesome story. I think
that's a true story. It's a true story.
No, but they're the type of stories that every podiatrist who's been around for a little while would have had similar things where you've spotted a melanoma on someone's foot, or just something where you've done something that has helped, got them out of pain. They now have lost 30 kilos in weight, and they've never been healthy, and you've added 10 or 15 years to their life. So everybody has got those stories. But one of the things you said then about the pot, doing the pottery, you've got to put the clay on, you've got to do it, you're going to stuff up some pots. So you're going to make mistakes along the way. And even my boxing coach is the same thing. It doesn't matter how good a boxer you are, you'll be the best professional in the world, you're going to get punched in the head. Doesn't matter how good you are at moving, no boxer is going to go into a fight that goes a couple of rounds and is not going to get hit a couple of times. So you just got to expect you're going to take a couple of hits. But they can't just give up. They get punched in the head once and go, oh, that's it, I'm out of here. I thought I was only going to hit them.
And that's not, we're not suggesting that you should go out and punch podiatrists either. That's not the message from.
No, that's not the message from this. So, Dave, I want to thank you for coming on the Podiatry Legends podcast again, representing the UK proudly.
Yep. You're welcome. Thank you. Appreciate the invite. It's always good to talk to you, mate.
If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way of doing it?
I spend quite a lot of time on LinkedIn. So I am Dave James on LinkedIn, and that's where I post most of my content. But you could also get me on my website, which is www.davethecoach.co.uk. And please don't judge me on my website because it needs some work. But LinkedIn and also got a YouTube channel as well, which I can't remember the weird 27-digit number code at the end of it. But LinkedIn, website.
You can set that up so it has Dave James the coach or something on there.
It might be. I think it might be Dave the coach now. I'm not sure.
I think if they just went to YouTube and typed in Dave James, I'm pretty sure your videos will pop up because I see them all the time.
Yeah, I need to use YouTube more. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, most of the time I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, and
that's where I see most of your videos is on LinkedIn.
Come find me there if you want to have a chat.
Okay, Dave, I want to thank you for coming on here again, and I look forward to talking again very soon.
Thanks, mate. Good to see you.